row. You have Paul George; he's doing his just due. But for me, I just feel like it could be a little bit more intense if Paul George was to give his 100%, which he's not able to do physically. And Dwayne Gaines, he mentioned also, that's what Indiana had a problem with, which means it might have had no problem with the trade, but it takes nothing away from the performance of Dame Lillard in this one-on-one matchup with Westbrook. You know what I mean? And, he's just showing who he is. It's a matchup that's going to continue for, in a healthy standpoint, for at least another decade if they keep meeting each other in these playoffs. Regular seasons games, they're not going to act like they like each other. We all know that Westbrook, he doesn't like anybody, and it's for his own therapy, for his performance. So don't walk up to that man shaking his hand. Don't have a good game or see you after the game or none of that. He's going to attack you. He's coming every chance he can. He's an angry player. He plays with a chip on his shoulder, and there's not too many other players that can handle it. But Dame Lillard, Dame time, is showing that he can maintain it. And it's surprising to me. Because they got swept last year, I didn't think it was going to be a competitive banter the way it is now. And OKC may be very well going home early in turn.
Yeah, they might. But one of the other things I do love about this particular battle and what you just mentioned about Westbrook is, like me and Baldy always talk, that brings us
shout the ball. You haven't met you yet, but shout
that brings us back to our era of basketball.
Yeah.
Where you my homie. We good.
Once that ball
love you to death. Don't want to see nothing bad happen.
I kill a brick for you.
Don't want to see nothing. I run through a brick wall twice for you. You step in between them lines, we gonna go at it.
Mm-hmm.
And like we used to do.
This is true.
Then we'd go drink a 40 or whatever.
Yeah, back then 40. We're screaming our age, but yes, 40.
But the whole point is, it brings us back to our era of basketball, and I think it's great. But I think we need people like us and people that were around in our era that might have kids that play now. These are the things that you need to point out to your kids. And a lot of people, we talked about, going backtracking a little bit, we talked about Kobe, with the things that he said about the AAU circuit, and believe it or not, people, there's a lot of truth to that.
It was.
Because you have these kids now that feel like they're entitled. I've been around quite a few high school ball players the last couple of years since I've been doing the show, a little bit more in the last year or so. And their attitudes are totally different than what our attitudes were.
Absolutely. I mean, the way the NBA and the referees have things designed, it's like a shooter's league now. Yeah. There's not really too much going on in the paint unless it's a rebound or unless it's someone, on a fast break catching an alley-oop or something. That's all fine and well for the fans. They pay to see that. But the grit of it all is being lost. Like this game, in my opinion, it's spectacular to watch. You love to see it, maybe Steph Curry go maybe 10 for 12 from the three. Klay Thompson had a good performance just last night. But the thing is, it takes away from the tenacity. It's a physical sport, and in my opinion, this game is one jump shot away from being tennis. I mean, you can't really touch anyone. You can't reach anymore. There's no physicality to the game.
Right.
And the AAUs and the high school guys, they come up with this entitlement that, things are owed to them instead of earned.
Absolutely. It's funny because I've always been one to say, and Baldy will tell you, when anybody that listens to the show, you ask them, you see him anywhere, anybody that knows me will tell you, I've always been a firm believer of knowing the history of your craft. Now, we talked before we came on air.
Mm-hmm.
And you talked about how we knew we were in the hood and we never paid attention to the hidden talents that were right in front of us.
That's correct.
With some of the people you mentioned. And you mentioned yourself about the boxing thing. But I'm sure, and I know from talking to you and knowing you and being around you, you did your homework. There wasn't a moment when we could sit around and the topic of boxing just popped up and somebody might say something and then you would say, well, no, this is what it was. It was this, this, and this.
Right.
You don't find that in a lot of these kids today. I mean, I've talked to kids and said to some kids, well, have you seen Charles Barkley play?
They don't even know who he is unless you watch a post game on TNT.
Right. They say, oh yeah, he the dude that talking on TNT. No,
he's not. That's not who he is.
I said, y'all like JoJo. Every time people talk about JoJo, they make references to Hakeem the Dream. Do you know who Hakeem the Dream is? And they'd be like, no, who was that? He an old head. He wasn't in my time. Point being, somebody before you that paved the way for you.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't just a plop out the sky, oh bang, you gonna be a basketball talent, you gonna go play. This your era, this what you watch, this what you gonna do. I guarantee you, and I know this for the split moment that I talked to him 2 years ago at the Big Three when it came to Philly. All of you guys, young guys, you know Allen Iverson. Believe it or not, Allen Iverson is a historian of the game. We had a brief conversation, and some of the things we talked about basketball, me being older than him, seeing seeing all the stuff that he saw, and a little bit more than what he saw. His basketball knowledge, his basketball IQ, and his love of the game is ridiculous.
Yes.
And you won't know it unless you talk to him.
And the thing, sorry for cutting you off. The thing is, okay, the average kid, that has a bright future in basketball, possibly the NBA or, wherever they may end up from their talents, they look up to the as they should, the Steph Currys, the Greek Freaks, the LeBron Jameses, the Kevin Durant's and everything. And I'm glad I accidentally mentioned Garnett. You have guys that are older that used to sit and look at tape of their favorite players from before. Now, if you were to ask a high school guy who's his favorite player, he'll probably give you a Durant or James or Curry or something like that of that nature. But with the high school kid doesn't know that the person that you looked up to someone too. And they didn't wait for the person that was actually on the court at the time, at their peak. They knew, I got to learn more. So it's pros that before I even was thought about being a pro, that I had to look at. Okay, do you really think that Kobe Bryant got to his success without looking at Michael Jordan? I mean, not for nothing, but the man chews gum just like him. I mean, if anybody had a choice to be, as the old saying goes, just like Mike, they would do it. But Kobe had the talent to do it. Mm-hmm. So he learned. And it got him one ring short of what Mike did. I mean, this doesn't come from entitlement. It comes from hard work, study, film, and the will to want to be a winner. So, just for a honorable mention for the high school kids, don't walk on that court, that entitlement. You're gonna run into a brick wall.
Yeah, you're gonna get knocked down to pay the two. So we went a little off, but it was definitely good stuff. So the next game I want to discuss is a game that was actually played on Saturday. And I have to bring this up because of some of the stuff that we just talked about and some of the things that you mentioned. I'm taking my notes here, I'm sure you saw. But I'm making reference to the Sixers-Nets game. We all know how that game played out, and we'll definitely get into talking about the little scuffle, the fiasco, or whatever it is you want to call it. But one of the things I want to bring up with that game is almost jumping right into the fiasco where Joel Embiid takes that foul on Jared Allen. Josh Allen, Jared Allen, whatever his name is. All right. If you look at that foul in real time, it looks like it was a harder foul than expected. When you see it in slow motion, broken down, you see it was a good, solid, hard basketball foul. And the first thing people are going to say, people are making reference to is, well, look at the way his head jerked. People, understand what you're watching. Joel Embiid and Jaron Allen. I say this to say, Joel Embiid outweighs this man by at least 50 pounds. So almost any foul that he gives him in that motion, Joel defending Allen trying to go to the basket, is going to look worse than what it was. Okay? And people say there should have been a flagrant 2. He got a flagrant 1 for it. Okay, fine and well. Point being what Demetrius said about the referees, the way they have been subjectively changing games with bad calls, non-calls, and we've seen it all season long. We've seen it in multiple sports. But getting back to that issue, the same thing, you go retro 2001 NBA Finals, Shaq Mutombo. Shaq outweighed Mutombo by almost the same amount.
Almost the same amount, yeah.
Mutombo got beat up.
Literally.
Beat up physically and literally that entire series. There's never an offensive foul called on Shaq. There's never any flagrant fouls called on Shaq. And again, we're talking about 2 different eras of the NBA. But being a referee myself as well, you can't look at just the bodies. Because if you look at the bodies, you're doing yourself a disservice as a referee. And I'm not saying you don't call that foul. You have to call that foul. It's a foul. You got to call it. But this is why they put in the replay. If I'm sitting at home with my remote slowing it down and I see that he didn't hit the man in the head, he barely touched his arm.
This is correct. This is true.
Barely touched his arms. I give you the foul. Heat of the moment. Go ahead, no problem with that. But now you go and you look at it and you say it's a flagrant 1. The definition of a flagrant 1 is like we talked about the football with the difference in the pass interference and all of that stuff. And what I mentioned to the guys, and we always laugh about, I said, still to this day in the NFL, we don't know what a completed catch is.
At this point,
it's funny, but it's real.
Mm-hmm.
When you think about it in hindsight, we still honestly don't know what a completed pass is.
And the thing about it, and in regards to the referees, yes, the way the league is going, you have to be careful. Players get injured, and you try to save that, but at the same token, you don't just do a disservice and just call any foul a flagrant 1.
Right.
Here it is. No, you have to look at what time the foul happens. If it happens like that in the first quarter, that's something to look at. But here we are at the heat of the moment. The score is tight. At that point, if I'm not mistaken, the Sixers were...
You were down.
Correct. We were down. So it's going to be a sense of urgency more than it was if it was an even score. Moments cost. So, in the defense in Joel Embiid, that's one of the leading blockers in the NBA.
Absolutely.
You can't ask permission from him on how this block is going to be or how the foul is going to be as long as it's not intentionally a flagrant 1.
Right.
A flagrant 1 is when you physically intentionally go for the body instead of the ball. That's not what happened. Not only that, we're not going to mention what's the guy that I don't even know his name, but he calls him a nobody.
Jared Dudley.
Jared Dudley.
Yeah.
And I stand corrected because I didn't even know his name. But yet, even still, you're on the other side of the court, run after the play is over, and you try to make ways to just get, the Philadelphia 76ers off their game because, they're in a way of winning at this point. The game is in their hands. It's their game to win or lose. You have no control over it. So, it wasn't really anything. And as I looked at the play, he was the only one acting like he was in the zoo.
Yeah.
You know, Ben Simmons, he fell into the
He
stands
Ben Simmons.
with his hands up.
Yeah.
Joel Embiid, you know, he could have
Just
easily
stepped
fell
away.
into it. He stepped away with his hands up. Okay, Jimmy Butler, he has a little different change of heart. You know, he sees the loyalty that it takes to be on a new team. He had no problem being himself. Okay, he got ejected and stood what he could do, knowing that it was still going to be a win and it wasn't going to cost the team at that point.
Right.
Bad behavior as a professional. You know, you got, the future looking at you, so we have to be also careful. But yet, this all goes back from the referees, taking the game too lightly. Like, you couldn't have Charles Oakley, Charles Barkley, Vinnie Johnson, Rick Mahorn. You can't have these guys. They wouldn't have survived in a situation like that back then. The game has changed.
Yeah, with them guys, punches would have been thrown.
Absolutely.
It might not even have been a push. It might have been a punch.
Yeah, just
on
really,
that
yeah.
A flat out punch.
Shout out to the legends, for keeping it the way it's supposed to be, And we're not warranting fights or anything, but if it's going to be a heat of a moment and all these guys are doing is doing pushing and shouting matches at each other, it's best to just keep it moving but what's most important, that the referee sees this.
Mm-hmm.
The referee has to see the game outside looking in. They
Absolutely.
go too far in, and it's costly for a call or two.
Yeah, one of the things I liked about that whole situation was everyone in the media and everyone around that situation said that they felt like it was good playoff basketball.
That's all
And the bottom line that everybody kept coming back to was there were no punches thrown, which I agree with. And like you said, I agree with that playoff basketball. I don't agree with the way Jared Dudley handled it. I don't have a problem with a push.
He's the veteran of the team,
right.
isn't he?
And I don't have
He's
a
supposed
problem.
to lead by example, right?
Lead by example. That's what I'm saying. I don't have a problem with you coming in and maybe getting in Joel's face, bumping whatever, and maybe a little
make him aware of his actions.
Rabbit push.
Yeah.
But you ran the length of the court, so obviously you couldn't have seen the entire play.
Correct.
You saw it from a distance.
Correct.
So you couldn't have seen what happened at that moment. And then to add insult to injury, Ben Simmons going through it with you in the media and in the game verbally still had enough moxie to realize the heat of the moment, what type of game it was, to step in. Not put his hands on. He steps in with his hands out, like with that look when the referee makes a call.
Of course, resistance.
Resistance, and you pull this man on top of you to incite more.
Yeah.
So, like you just mentioned, you're the veteran. You got to do better.
And here's a 23-year-old in Ben Simmons that has more mature approach than you do.
It's Joel, 25 years.
Yeah. Yes.
It was frustration because I think at that point they felt the game turning. Because again, they don't have any answer for Joel Embiid.
They don't.
And they were short with Ed Harris. But even with that, they don't have any answer for Joel Embiid. So like you said, there was some frustration in that. And getting back to the Sixers side, the issue with Jimmy Butler, no issue at all. No issue at all with it. He did what he did. He backed up his teammate. But like we say, the game within the game. You think about it, and hindsight is 20/20, like they like to say. And a lot of people, I'm sure, probably didn't even think about it this way. A lot of my Sixers fans, fellow Sixers fans, didn't think about it this way. You got to realize one of the things that Jimmy did, which was very, very important. He jumped in so JoJo wouldn't have to jump in. Even though JoJo did make it his own point to just say, look, I'm not even getting in it with this dude. Jimmy Butler made sure by jumping in, protecting his brother, protecting his teammate. Jimmy got ejected, but
so he wouldn't.
As a true leader on a team who's only been here half a season, still, it shows me that he's comfortable with these guys. He's developed a bond with these guys, and he understands for them to be successful, they can get by without me on the court. But we need that big fella.
That's right.
And that big fella got to stay in the game.
He even said in the press conference, if it was to
I'll
happen all over again,
myself.
he'll do it all over again the same way. Because it's the motive, not the action behind it. People may overlook that statement and say, well, okay, okay, Mr. Butler, if it happened all over again, what would he said? I'd push him again and make sure nothing happened to my team.
Right, absolutely. That's why Jimmy is my guy. And
Mhm.
Jimmy, we gonna get this interview to happen. I've been tagging you, posting and stuff. It's gonna happen. I understand the season is in the heat of it. I'm willing to wait. I'll wait. It'll happen.
He'll
It's
even
gonna
take one
happen.
for the team.
That's right. I'll take one. I'll take two for the team if I can get that interview.
That's right.
You are tuned in to Sports Rap Heat 100 Radio. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, got a little bit more basketball. And since I have a guest today, I'm going to get into the topic of the day. If you don't remember what it was, get over to Facebook now while we're on break. It's in the group page. Look for it. It's titled Topic of the Day. You're going to have to scroll and find it. But if not, when we come back, we'll get into that too. It's your boy D. He's not with me right now. It's your boy D.
And Demetrius Dixon.
Sports Rap Heat 100 Radio, and we'll see you on the other side. Good stuff. Good stuff. Now you see how I said we got to the AAU and both.
It floats around. It floats around.
Yeah.
It floats around.
It floated around because, like I said, references was made. That's why I said I'm sitting here making my notes.
Mhm.
References were made, and it flows right in.
And I'm
But
sure
it didn't feel
sometimes you had the liberty
Oh,
to
yeah.
whatever you prepared for don't even come off the
Yeah.
page,
Yep.
and it just the
Yeah.
program just flows on its
Yep.
own.
That's
Which
why
is
I
also
just
good.
like to have stuff here,
Mhm.
just in case stuff gets short or we get through stuff quick. I got
Mhm.
something else that we can go to.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I have had moments when I sat here and been like, "Oh damn, I ain't even get to this page
Right.
or this page."
Are you touching on